Can you also hear me okay? Because I'm messing with my audio. Thanks.
You still hear us?
Yeah, I can. I just can't get my headphones to work, so I'm just gonna let it go.
Good morning, everybody, for the first meeting of the Public Protection and Judiciary Committee of the new term. Just real quickly, Supervisor Leaf is online and will be joining us, and Supervisor Adams is excused. So we'll call the committee to order, and we'll ask Janet Smith to read the roll.
Bob Fiedler.
Present.
Paul Adams. Mark Carlson. Kathy Lee.
Present.
Tim Rambert.
Present.
Could I have a motion to approve the minutes of Thursday, February 1st?
I make that motion.
Supervisor moves. Second. Supervisor Carlson, second. Is there any objection? They're approved. Excuse me. We had a move the approval of the minutes by Supervisor Ramberg and a second by Supervisor Carlson. They were approved unanimously. Public comment? Seeing no public comment, we'll move on to our business items. I am the convener this morning of the Public Protection Committee because this is our first meeting of the year, and our first order of business is election of a chair. The election basically is a nomination. There's no need for a second. There'll be discussion after that, and any number of nominations are acceptable, of course. So we'll move to the first item of business and election of a chair. Supervisor Ramberg.
I nominate Bob Fiedler.
Any other nominations? Any discussion? If there are no discussion and no other nominations from the floor, would somebody like to maybe move just...
Move to close nominations.
Move the nominations are closed and an adoption by acclamation? Would that be acceptable? I'll just say everybody's been nodding their head. So we'll say that that's unanimous election of the chair. Thank you very much. We'll hope to really try to do our best to be fair and have a very, very good year for all of us. The second item of business is election of the vice chair. Do we have any nominations?
I'll nominate Kathy Lee.
Supervisor Carlson nominates Supervisor Leaf. Is there any other nominations from the floor? Seeing none, we'll close off debate on that. And again, is there a motion to move by acclamation for Supervisor Leaf to be vice chair?
I'll make that motion.
Supervisor Ramberg has done that. Is there any discussion? And so that's unanimously accepted.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
First item of business is consideration of our meeting schedule and times. We've typically met at this time of the month, the first Tuesday of the month at 8 o'clock. So I'll just open that up to discussion about anybody would have any other suggestions. I see none. The only thing we did last year, we talked a little bit about when dates came up that we were pretty certain would be slow times of the year or that would be full of other activities that we would not have to meet. We would not necessarily schedule a meeting. So I think last year we had a total of 9 meetings. And so we'll continue with that policy if that's acceptable to everybody. And if something comes up, of course, we can have an emergency meeting. We had one of those, I think, last year to cover an important issue that we had to address. So we can always do that. Otherwise, we'll continue with the schedule that we've had. Okay. The next item, I'm going to call on the sheriff to discuss, if he will, and that's a resolution honoring Deputy Katie Lysing.
Thank you.
Sheriff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, we wanted to introduce this resolution, and hopefully it can be pushed forward as we kind of roll into almost a year now. We are just a couple days shy of 1 year of the event. You know, I guess in a perfect world, this resolution would have been early after the event, but there was just so much going on. And then as the year rolled on, there was really not a great time for me to try to come up with something. But as we come up on the year, and especially with the renaming of the roadway coming up as well here in June 8th, we'll have a ceremony, kind of a smaller one, hopefully, just because of size and out of respect for the family, but also law enforcement presence. I'd like to incorporate somehow this resolution into that event that day. one of the things we'll do is recognize, obviously, the renaming that day, but also her service. And I think that this resolution at this time really drives that point home of that event, of that day. So with the help of Administrator Witt, and he had come up with some wording. I had thrown a little bit in there as well, but I think it encapsulates that day, her sacrifice, and there's a couple overviews of law enforcement in general and the dangers that we face every day. So yeah, we're hoping that this continues to move through, and I'll discuss more about that day probably at next Tuesday at County Board as I present my year-end review of 2023, and this will be probably part of it as well. So with that, I defer back if there's any questions.
We should probably now bring the resolution to the floor. Would somebody like to move the resolution?
Yeah, I'd like to bring the resolution to the floor.
So Supervisor Carlson moves the resolution. Is there a second?
Second.
I'm sorry. Supervisor Carlson moved it. Supervisor Leaf seconded it. It's discussion.
I didn't catch that.
Oh, I just repeated what you did. So is there any discussion from anybody on the resolution?
Remember, I'm half deaf.
Well, I'll just lead off and say, of course, it's absolutely, appreciate Sheriff you putting it together, and the events that have occurred over the last year, and of course her service to the county, and it's certainly going to, I'm sure, be moved very quickly through the board. Are there other comments? Hearing no other comments, the motion has been made, and so the vote is on adoption of the resolution to honor the deputy. All those in favor say aye.
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 Resolution is adopted and will be before the board next week.
Thank you.
Then any other items that you've got, Sheriff, to bring up now, or while we're with you?
No, but I'll keep it on this topic. So Law Enforcement Memorial Week is coming up, so we'll be traveling to DC. Actually, next Friday, we'll be traveling to Madison, where her name will be placed on the wall down there on the ceremony. And then next week, starting May 11th, a number of us will be in DC for that national recognition. But a lot of good support, a lot of good community support, and a lot of support from this board. So without all of that support, we would not be able to recognize her as well as we are. So that goes a lot of different avenues. So,
Sheriff, would you want to just amplify also on the current status of the memorial outside the sheriff's office, and when we might, how it's progressing?
yeah, the fundraising continues. We're kind of winding down on, the community has given a lot. They've given so much. But that fundraising, I think there's one or two more events, nothing real big as we've had in the past. And I believe the memorial will start to really take shape in early next spring, January, February, right through there. We're still waiting on some granite and materials and some things like that. Ultimately, if all goes well, our plan is to probably do this dedication of that memorial, the official dedication, at the Law Enforcement Memorial Week in 2025, which is only a year from today. I say a year because this last year has gone by very fast. So, but I think we'll be in very good shape come May of 2025 for that memorial, honoring all of the law enforcement officers from St. Croix County. One of those, Hudson PD, that we'll be recognizing.
Thank you. If there's no other comments from the sheriff, our next item of business was the medical examiner's update, and we have a big traffic jam in St. Croix County this morning because of the rain, and so I haven't heard from Patty as to whether she's going to be joining us or not. So we've got just a couple of minutes that I'm not going to filibuster the group, but I know that we like to try to have everything on the agenda so the public can observe what we're doing. But I think I'm going to also take the liberty of asking if any of the other folks that are here today would have anything they would particularly like to see on our agenda, or any comments they've got about their departments. We haven't met as a committee for several months, so there's a little bit of a gap in communication that's occurred, so I think that's appropriate, unless anybody objects to that. Let me just start with the Director of Justice Services, Phil Gall, if he's got anything to say.
No real updates. I think the only thing would be our next full council CJCC meeting is next Thursday, the 9th at 8 a.m. here, so 1 week from today. That's probably the biggest update that I have at this time.
Phil, just to remind everybody tell us just in a couple of minutes, what is the CJCC, kind of who's on it, what are your subcommittees, when do you typically meet, what are the big issues you're facing now?
Sure. The CJCC is the Community Justice Collaborating Council. Meets every other month, the second Tuesday of every other month at 8 a.m. here. So again, next Thursday, excuse me, the 9th. So our next meeting, we have 6 subcommittees. So there's the Criminal Justice Subcommittee, Behavioral Health Subcommittee, Treatment Court Subcommittee, Domestic Violence Subcommittee, Child Welfare Subcommittee, Child Welfare Juvenile Justice, and then there is also an Executive Subcommittee. Each of those groups meet either every other month or quarterly, and they, again, address issues in those specific areas. Each of those subcommittees, well, 4 of the 6 subcommittees are headed up by each of one of our 4 judges. The Behavioral Health Subcommittee is headed up by Bob Rarick from Health and Human Services, and then the Executive Subcommittee by Chief Judge Needham. The idea of CJCC broadly is to bring together stakeholders from across the community, many of whom are sitting around this table. But it's not just folks that are part of public protection and judiciary, it's adjacent to the system. So folks that are working in child welfare, and they are in the faith-based community and other aspects. I think that all of the subcommittees are active and have separate projects going on, but maybe one particular example, the Juvenile Justice Child Welfare Subcommittee was formed last October to deal with ongoing child welfare needs. Not just, we're experiencing them here in St. Croix County, but it's across the state and across the country. And one of the issues that we're looking at is truancy. So chronic absenteeism from school and how to address that. So that's one of the things that we're looking at, and looking at some of the policies of truancy here in the county and how can we address that at several levels, right? So at the circuit court level, municipal court level, schools, and then at home. So that's, I think, again, a very broad overview of what we do on the CJCC.
Would it be fair to say that we have some overlap between our 2 entities? But typically you folks dig really deep into these issues. You've got a lot of experts that are on your subcommittees, and you might come up with an idea that goes in through the CJCC, and you might bring that to our attention if it's to result in an ordinance or resolution, for example, in truancy. Would that be a fair way to describe how an item might progress?
It would be, and that's, Chair Fiedler, that's a really good point that I probably should have made at the beginning. All of the authority that the CJCC has comes from the county board. The creation of the CJCC and its subcommittees comes from the county board level. But Chair Fiedler is correct. If we have kind of what we would call like a forward-facing policy. So, for example, last year in our adult treatment court, we updated our fee schedule. And that was something that we brought to public protection after it was discussed at the treatment court subcommittee. Public protection approved it, and then we moved it on up to the county board level. So yeah, it is a group of individuals, stakeholders as I like to call them, that bring forward issues for approval at that subcommittee and then county board level as well.
Only because you might be the most appropriate person who's here today to comment. I know Bob Rarick at Health and Human Services and his staff, and yourself and some of your staff have been working on the Mental Health Symposium. Could you comment quickly on the Mental Health Symposium?
Yeah, so that was last night, and again, I would defer to Bob Rarrett on that. I had a very limited role, but from what I understand, it went very well, and it was bringing together, again, individuals to speak on the topic of suicide and prevention and intervention. I think a lot of the work stemmed from some of the unfortunate deaths that happened at UW River Falls last fall. So there were several presentations. There were a faculty member from UW River Falls. There were our peer support specialists here in the county. They filmed some discussion of the work that they do, and then brought together emerging adults. So youths, children that are, again, entering adulthood, that 18 to 21 age range, to talk about some of the challenges that they're experiencing. So from what I understand, again, it was very powerful. And I think, again, mental health challenges, they touches all aspects of life, and the justice system is just one part. But yeah, that took place at St. Croix Central High School last night.
Thank you for that update. Just a quick history for some of the members of the committee, and our committee has for the last 4 years, have sponsored I'll call it a symposium on different topics dealing with public safety and protection. And the first one dealt with drug abuse. I know the sheriff was very active in that particular program. I think Judge Waterman was our keynote speaker from the Judiciary. We did one on elder abuse, and again, the sheriff and his staff were very active in that, and I think Judge Flack was kind of a keynoter. The year after that, I believe Judge Nordstrom was one of the key speakers on a program, again, related to mental health, but focusing on alcohol abuse in the treatment court. And so we might, as a committee, just want to think, and we don't have to address it in detail now, but over the next month, think about if there's a topic, and we can consult with all the folks that are here today, that would be worthy of having a separate program on. These are all open to the public, of course, and we'll try to bring in experts to take a deep dive into a subject and explain where we sit as a county on a particularly important issue. So maybe I'll just throw that out as a possible thing for the future. If people have an idea for that, we would maybe consider that at our next meeting. I know we have representatives here from the District Attorney's Office. Any comments that would like to be made? Not necessary to do so. Right.
He didn't have any specific instructions or anything to bring up, so nothing from us.
Okay. Elisa, anything from your very active department?
We're a very quiet department, yes. Just a shout out to our Wins Saves grant regarding providing safety to the public in realms of child support services. So giving an avenue to individuals who do not feel safe in going through and establishing a child support order based on some domestic issues that have been going on. So that's progressing very well. And we will be one of the 3 counties, Kenosha and Brown County, as a pilot for the whole state of Wisconsin child support program. So it's a 5-year grant.
That sounds interesting. I've been remiss in as we've gone around, just again soliciting the supervisors if they had any other additional comments, but we're not a bashful group, so I assumed anybody who would like to comment would jump right in, so please feel free to do that. And of course, our clerk of court is with us, and that's always a very busy office. Christy, would you have anything you'd like to share with us before we move on?
Thank you. I don't really have a whole lot to share, but yes, we are very busy. We are hoping to finally fill our last position within the next month, but then we'll get another new position come January. So also preparing for the renovation of our office and how that process is going, but yes, very busy in the courts. Appreciative of your support of the judges and everyone at the table, and because we will work collaboratively with everyone in here. So thank you very much.
Any questions or thoughts for Christy? Seeing none, that concludes the business items of the agenda. We're at the request for future items. Kathy, we're trying not to ignore you. You're still with us on the...
Yes, I am.
Okay, great.
2 hours behind you.
Very good.
So I'm on heavy duty coffee.
All right.
I think a topic, to your point, a fentanyl update would be good. Like, and it's something I think we can work with HHS on too.
I think that's a great idea, and we have, on several of these programs, very much coordinated with HHS, and of course Supervisor Leaf sits on that board and is a great liaison for us on that topic, as well as other issues that we deal with with them. Any other future items that one would like to put on the agenda? For sure. I know one of the things that it's not necessarily an exact future agenda item, but last year we were trying to get a reasonable statistical picture of what was happening in the various entities that report to this committee, and I'd kind of like to push that again this year at a reasonable pace, but hopefully at our next meeting we might want to just inquire about what reasonably can be done, what kind of data would be helpful to us. We don't want to just make work, but there's a lot of data that's just available out there that's used by all the different offices, and some of it might be very useful to give us an overall picture of what's happening and needs that you've got for the future. So I just throw that out that we'll probably be bringing that up again and trying to work through how that might best be prepared. It's not meant to be a super major project. I would hope that most of the data one would share with us would already be prepared, and it would just be a matter of collating it and sharing it to see if there are trend lines that we can reach conclusions from. Any other requests for future agenda items? You can always make them, of course, during the month as we progress, and we've tried very hard to always accept anybody's suggestions for an item, so I think it's a pretty open and relaxed committee in that sense, so we're wide open to suggestions. With that, we'll move to announcements and correspondence. Janet? Oh, that was quick. Any other announcements, correspondence? The sheriff has made some very good announcements about what's happening. I guess June 8th would be the key date, Sheriff, with regard to the highway dedication.
Yes. Yeah, and we're still in the planning phases of that, coordinating with Senator Rob Staffschultz, who proposed that bill and got that pushed through, along with some key co-signatures on that. Also working with the National Guard, the Adjunct General, and in hopes of his attendance as well. That stretch of roadway is also the 128th Division for the National Guard, so they were kind enough to allow a co-designation of that, so that will be all part of hopefully that ceremony, and we can recognize so many that made this happen. So.
Great, thank you. Any other announcements? Hearing none, we've got a relatively short meeting today. We'll, of course, work with the medical examiner. She's probably been caught in that traffic jam, so we'll look forward to seeing her in June, and with that, we're adjourned. Our next
Thanks,
meeting will be at
everybody.
our regular scheduled meeting date, so we're adjourned.